right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for your interest in children's ministry here at Mount Bethel. Very important training that we're in. We love kids, and we believe that children are inherently valuable and that they are a blessing made in the image of God. Jesus even told us that children can teach us something. They provide a model of faith and dependence for us all to see. Listen to the words of our Lord from Mark chapter 10. "Let the little children come to me, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs." And so that's the spirit in which we want to welcome kids here at our church. And it's our goal to love our kids with the love of Christ and provide a safe and fun atmosphere for them each and every week. And so that's the purpose of today's training, and I encourage you to be fully present and engage for the next hour or so and listen to everything that's been prepared by our presenters today. So I'd like to pray for this afternoon's meeting. Would you bow with me, and let's ask the Lord's blessing on our time. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this group of faithful servants that are gathered here this afternoon. I pray your blessing on each of them. I pray that you would bless the good ministry that you have planned for them, ministering to all the kids that you send our way. May you bless our training and bless those who have prepared and will come and present to us how we can best serve here in this vital ministry. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
I guess I'm up. All right, I think everybody has a very official children's ministry training manual in front of them. And as we go through, a lot of the documents, really all the documents are in here, so feel free to read through them and look through them as we're going through the training, just to make sure that you understand some of the things that we're talking about today. Okay, I wanted to start really quickly with our mission statement, and we have a very nice, rather new logo, and I love the little tagline underneath where it says, "Loving God, loving people." And when I think of the children's ministry, I would actually like to change the last word to "loving God, loving kids." And so I think if we can keep that as our overall focus as we're serving the children, I think that will really help. And as we go through here, of course, when I think about love, I always come to that verse in 1 Corinthians, and I have it up there on the screen. And I kind of bolded a couple words that really just kind of stick out to me, and those are patient, love is kind, it is not easily angered, it always protects. And I really feel like these are the overarching things that we're trying to do downstairs as we minister to our kids. Patience and kindness, of course, are so important when dealing with children and can be quite difficult sometimes. It is not easily angered. That is something that kind of comes back to our patience. But as we're working with the youth, remembering that they are kids and that they're learning, trying to keep our patience is a very important thing. And then, of course, it always protects. And I think that's really one of the main focuses of our training as well today, is that we're going to kind of go through some things like bloodborne pathogens and things like cleaning and things like child abuse. And what it really comes back to is just protecting our kids. They are such a gift from God. And I know as a new parent myself now, I can't think of anything more important than them. And so on behalf of the parents, but also on behalf of the ministry team here, I thank you so much for being here, because this really is so important, because they're really the most incredible gift that God has given to us. So I thank you for taking this time to kind of review our policies and procedures and learn a little bit with me here. When we think of loving kids, we think of hugging kids and embracing kids. However, there's a lot of other ways to show love to children. And in the world that we live in today, some of those things are no longer appropriate. Giving children kisses in the nursery, unfortunately, unless they're your own children, is no longer really appropriate. But here are other things that we can do that really model Christ's love. Looking them in the eye when we speak to them, relating to them, telling them stories when we were little. Reporting positive things at pickup to the parents so that they know we're on the lookout for their good behavior. Being consistent with them, with the rules. That's hard. It's very hard, but it's hard for them sometimes when they see, they get corrected for a behavior, and then they see the student next to them being able to do the same thing. So little things like that we can do, just kind of keeping in mind as we work down there. Here, Sunday morning programs, I think you're all very well versed in what we have going on down there, but I'm going to review it just in case. So our children's ministry really begins at 10 o'clock during the typical worship hour up here, and we have 3 programs that run. The infant room, which is being newly renovated. We're almost done. It still needs a few finishing touches down there, but that is for the little guys, the infants, ages 0 to 18 months. And that was really designed for the smallest children, really up until they're walking. And, you know, we can be flexible with that. Of course, if we feel that there are some kids who need to move out of there a little bit faster, that's fine. We can certainly have the conversation, but just to kind of set some parameters. And then the room next to that, there's actually 2 rooms next to that, and that's for our toddlers, our pre-K, and our kindergarten students. And once again, there is some flexibility with that when they're ready to move into the elementary classroom, which is for 1st to 5th grade students. And you can see the times are a little bit different. 10 o'clock is when we welcome the infants, as well as the toddlers, pre-K, and kindergarten students downstairs. 10:15 is when we start with the 1st through 5th grade students, simply because they're up here to listen to the music. So it's a nice chance for them to start to integrate up here into the regular service. We let them listen to the music, sometimes the announcements, and then they're excused and they come downstairs. And that kind of gives them a little bit of a sense of responsibility. They feel a little bit bigger and older coming down the stairs by themselves. We're just going to take a few minutes here to talk about each of the different rooms and just some of the things that we have in there. In terms of the infant room, we don't really have a set schedule. Those guys are so little, and their abilities are very varying, even between 0 and 18 months. But there is in your binder a list of suggested activities. And the reason I put that in there is that sometimes if an infant is crying, an hour seems like a very, very long time. So there are some different things you can do in there just to kind of mix it up for them. And I know there's some times where, even with my own daughter, I'm looking for other ways to kind of keep her entertained. Just a couple of tips I wanted to talk about really quick. Some infants, as you know, spit up a little bit, so there are cloths and blankets down there, and if you feel comfortable draping it over your shoulder while you hold them just to make sure your clothing doesn't get spit up or any of those bodily fluids on them, you are more than welcome to do that, and I would actually encourage you to do that. Frequently rotate activities. Their attention spans at this age are very short, so make sure that if they get fussy at something, try something different. We're trying to be very careful with the toys that we keep in that room, making sure that there aren't any parts small enough that they could ingest and possibly choke on. We try to be really careful, but occasionally something stray might go in there, so if you could just be mindful of that, that would be great. Something I'm learning with my own daughter is that a lot of infants exhibit a bit of a fussy period right before they are tired. So most mothers will probably not drop their kids off hungry, but I know fussiness can also be a sign of hunger, and it kind of varies upon the child, but sometimes they just need to be rocked and kind of sung to and walked around for a little bit, and then they might kind of conk off in your arms. So you can keep that in mind too. Of course, if that's going on for a certain amount of time and you're feeling uncomfortable, no problem. We can always send someone up here to get mom and make sure everything's okay, but just kind of keeping that in mind. That's, like I said, something that was new to me as a new mom. A couple more tips for the infant room. In this room especially, if you could try to arrive 5 to 10 minutes early, and I know this is hard. I am personally a person that is chronically a few minutes late, so I understand this is difficult, but it really makes that transition a little bit easier for these little guys. It's hard for them sometimes, they have a hard time leaving their mom, and then maybe they'll come to me, and then I have to pass them off to somebody else, so that's like another transition for them. So if that person could come just a few minutes early, it just makes that process a little bit easier. And some children have no problem going to whomever is down there, and that's not a problem, but there are a couple kids, and especially for newcomers coming to church, it's probably nice for them to drop off to one person, and that same person, gives the child back to them at the end. It just seems a little bit more consistent. Of course, at this age, the parents will be signing their children in and out, and something very important is that even though there is a diaper changing area in there, volunteers are not permitted to change diapers. So if the child does a dirty diaper, we'll send somebody upstairs to get the parent to do that task. There are lots of supplies downstairs. If you don't see them out, we have some of them kind of hidden away in the cabinet as well as in the changing table, so feel free to look for things that you need, like tissues or blankets or what other kind of things you might need. Because these infants are so little, they're going to be putting a lot of things in their mouth. That's just very typical with this age of development. So we have something called a mouth bucket downstairs, which is basically just a plastic bucket. So anything that they put in their mouths when they're done playing with it, if you could just place it in there, and then at the end of the time we'll wash that. Just to kind of trying to keep germs, the transfer of germs to a minimal if we can. And I think you're all aware of this, but the way we have the rotation set up downstairs is that we actually have 3 people in those 3 rooms. One person's like the primary infant person for that week. The next person's the primary toddler, pre-K, kindergarten person, and then we have somebody who's the floater, who's going to kind of bounce back and forth in between. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, there's a lot of kids in there that day, or both of them are crying at the same time, and you don't know who to go to first, of course, feel free to flag down that floater if the floater's in the other room, and have them come over and give you a hand for a little while. And the idea with that position was that they could very easily go back and forth between the two rooms depending on what activity is needed. Okay, great. We'll pop right into the next room, which is our toddler, pre-K, and kindergarten student room. We do have a little more of a set schedule in this room, and you can see in your binders we actually have a suggested schedule of activities, and there's also a sheet in there with some of the rules that we have for that age, and that's simply because as I'm learning with my own son, that is an age where they will start to test the boundaries and they get a little more independent and feel a little bit more freedom, but it's important that we're consistent with them down there and that we keep it as a fun time for them, but also a structured time. And so we do have some rules that we usually review at the beginning, and then there's a little bit of organized play. There's a prayer. We're trying to teach them how to pray. There's a little bit of a lesson we try to do with them, and then some activity room time, and then snack, and then usually a little more free play at the end, followed up by the reward for, hopefully, good behavior. This is a suggested schedule of activities, and if you feel that you need to change this that works better for you, that is certainly fine. This is just a suggested thing. I know some of us were talking about that where it might be better to do snack time at the very end because we don't want them drinking all this water and then having to run to the bathroom, because that's something that we're not supposed to do, is take them to the bathroom. So if you want to move that to the end, I'm completely fine with that. But this is just, like I said, a suggested list of activities. A couple more tips for the toddler, pre-K, and kindergarten students. Once again, please arrive 5 to 10 minutes early for that transition time. Like I said, I know it's hard, but if you can try to be mindful of that, or in my case, if I tell myself I'm going to arrive 15 minutes early, and then when I arrive only 5 minutes early or on time, at least that's better than being 5 minutes late. Once again, at this age, parents will be signing their children in and out. Once again, volunteers are not able to change diapers if the children are still in diapers, or even assist in the bathroom. So if that need comes up, like I said, that's the nice thing about having the floater, or like I said, sometimes I'll just be down there checking in on some things. We can always send somebody upstairs, or when the parents sign in, we actually have a list of their cell phone numbers. So if you feel more comfortable just texting them or something like that, that's fine too. But like I said, the main thing there is that we're actually not the people assisting with those bathroom needs. Once again, if you need extra help, the floater is down there to assist you. And same thing with the infant room. We also have a different mouth bucket in that room for toys that they're putting in their mouths. Trying to break them of that habit. However, they are still little, and that whole teething thing kicks in, and some of them just can't help but put their toys and fingers and all kinds of things in their mouths. Moving right along to the elementary class, where we have our 1st to 5th grade students. Just a couple tips. Once again, these students will be coming down after the music portion upstairs here. In terms of the signing in and signing out procedure, the way that we have it is that if the child is under 8, the parent is really responsible for signing in and signing out. If they're older than 8, they're considered responsible enough to walk downstairs to do that themselves. So that's something we'll kind of keep in mind of. And if you notice downstairs on the sign-in sheet, there is the child's name as well as their age. So just if you could try to make sure, if you're in that classroom, that you get the signature in and the signature out. And if a parent forgets to sign their child out, if you could bring that sign-up sheet upstairs, as they're dismissed upstairs, and sign them out, that would be, make sure the parent signs them out. That would be very helpful. And that's just really just for our own safety and for security reasons, that we need to make sure the little ones have are supervised at all times. In terms of how things go down there in that elementary classroom, it would be great, and this is something I know a lot of us do, if we begin the lesson with prayer. I know this is something that kind of helps settle them down, and something I've been doing recently with them too is just asking for their prayer requests. And it's actually quite a powerful thing to hear these little guys come up with these burdens on their heart. Like, my grandmother's really sick, can we pray for her? That's quite amazing that at that age they have some of those things that they want to share with the group. So if we could begin the lesson with prayer, and then we're using the hands-on Bible curriculum downstairs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. There is a whiteboard down there, which I know a lot of us use to write down the Bible verse for that week, so feel free to use that as well. And then once again, after the lesson, closing in prayer, kind of reviewing those prayer requests. I know when you remember their prayer requests and kind of repeat them at the end, they seem to kind of just show their enjoyment in knowing that, okay, you remembered and that you're actually going to pray for them. So that's something, if we can keep in mind, would be really nice to do. Okay, moving right into the hands-on Bible curriculum. We've been using this in the elementary class for, I guess, a couple years now, and I actually was looking into it for the younger group too, the toddler, pre-K, and kindergarten group as well, just to have a resource really for some place to go to. So I just wanted to show you really quick what this actually looks like. There's actually 3 main pieces, and this is the teacher guide, which is kind of all really the meat of the lesson in here. There is a CD that comes with it, where a lot of the activities in here will refer to the CD, and we do have a CD player in both rooms, so you're welcome to use that as well. And then this is the box that the kids really love, and this is they call it the Learning Lab, and what it is just basically a box of different fun little things, activities and things that they can do. And once again, the teacher's manual will refer you to the Learning Lab for the different materials that are in here. And one of the things that we've been doing with the older grade, which I thought was a fabulous idea, was after we're done with this set of the Learning Lab, is we actually keep these things and then we give them to the kids as prizes later on for good behavior, as kind of a reward system, which is really nice, because for us to just throw them away seems so wasteful. So of course, though, if the parts are really small for the little ones, that's probably not the best thing to do. However, the curriculum for the toddler, pre-K, and kindergarten students, I checked it, and the pieces are pretty big in there, which is good. But just once again, we'll just keep mindful of that with choking. Inside your binder, I actually have a sample lesson for each set of curriculum, and I know it looks rather lengthy, and so I'm here to just kind of calm your fears about that one, because I know even as a teacher, when I saw this, I thought, oh my goodness, this is an 8-page lesson for an hour. That seems a lot. So I just want to tell you that you do not have to do everything in here. These are just a list of suggested activities. So please don't feel overwhelmed by the size of this in here. But what is nice about this curriculum is that everything you need is included. So you don't have to, make a quick trip to the to the store late at night to get index cards because you realize you need them. No, actually, everything you need really is in here. And if there are other things that you think of bringing in, we do have lots of supplies downstairs. But the one thing I did want to draw your attention to is that in each lesson, usually on the second page, this is really a key page. This is called This Lesson at a Glance, and this just kind of breaks down the entire lesson. And so you can see all the list of activities in here, and so you can kind of go through and say, okay, yes, I'll do the attention grabber. Yes, I'll do the Bible exploration, but no, that activity I don't like. That one's going to be too long. That one's going to be too complicated. Oh, but I'll go back to the closing. And that's fine. Like I said, feel free to read through here and use the activities that you feel would be best appropriate for the group. If you feel as though this activity might be a little bit complicated and even just reading through it seems complicated, that's okay. You don't have to use it. And if you have another idea that still illustrates the same Bible point, then certainly you can do that as well. On the first page is really kind of the meat of the lesson, where it has a Bible point. So that's the thing that we're really trying to hammer home to the kids. So in this case, for the sample lesson for 1st to 5th grade students, it's we can trust God to work things out for the best. Okay, so that's really the Bible point that they are hoping to drive home to the kids. And then underneath is a Bible verse, so they do pull a Bible verse from Scripture that is based on. And then underneath that is called the Teacher Enrichment, and it's basically just a summary of the lesson in the Bible and where it comes from. So, and then after that, like I said, once again, you have the key to the lesson, which is this lesson at a glance page, and then it has a lot of the activities. And this format is very scripted. And some people like that. They like to have a script from which to read. Other people don't like that scripted part. And that's okay. That's a personal preference. And so if you don't want to read it scripted, you certainly don't have to. But like I said, this I think is nice because it does provide us with just lots of options in terms of different activities that we can use. And what we can do is, we've been using this for a couple years. Like I said, I did get the set that matches for the toddler, pre-K, and kindergarten room, and we can try it out for a session and see how we like it. And if you don't like it, that's fine. We can certainly change it and look for something better, but I thought at least it would be a good place to start with the little guys. It's just, some place to have some resources in terms of, the materials that we're teaching downstairs. Oh, and one other thing, too, and this is something I learned the hard way. This Learning Lab is quite exciting for kids, and it's something that they want to get their hands into. So what I found is best is pull out the materials you need and kind of put them to the side before the lesson, because I've made the mistake a few times of keeping this box out on the table, and they just can't help themselves. It's like this mad rush to the box to pull out whatever looks fun in there. So, you might want to set them aside up someplace high, and it kind of keeps them a little more of a surprise for them, which is always fun for the kids. Oh, and then one more thing, in terms of where these things are kept, for the older group downstairs, we keep these in the closet. So as you're walking downstairs, it's the closet all the way on the back to the right is where we keep these supplies. And then in the toddler, pre-K, kindergarten room, it'll be kept up on the shelf. So if you need those materials, that's where we will be keeping them. I just realized I haven't asked you if you had any questions. So I'm sorry if you had one, but I'm going to ask you now if you have any questions at this point, because the next part we're actually going to go through the training manual. So this is probably a good place for questions. So does anybody have any questions? Oh, okay. Fabulous. I just knew. No, I didn't. All right, what a good class. No questions. All right. Moving forward. The next thing we're going to go through is actually the training manual. It's called the Commitment to Child Protection Manual. And this is something that is really put out for children's protection. And it's really, the purpose of this is really meeting some of the insurance, some of the things that the insurance company want us to cover, but really the overarching thing here is just for the safety of our kids. More important than even the insurance company is that we want to really adhere to the strictest standards because we're dealing with such precious little people here. And so we want to make sure that we're doing things that are going to cover ourselves in case of an injury or an incident, but also for the protection of the kids as well. And so I'm going to kind of go through the manual here. And if you have any questions, I think we'll do the same thing. We'll kind of wait to the end of this portion, and then I can certainly answer your questions. I don't have everything written up here. I kind of summarized most of the manual in here. I have every word up here on the manual. So as we're going through, if you just kind of want to read through to make sure you understand all the wording in there, and certainly if you have any questions at the end, we can, we can go through that. So as part of our training manual here, one of the things we do to help protect the children is we really have what I think is a fair but also a strict selection and screening of church staff and volunteers. And what this means is basically, and as harsh as it sounds, if somebody just says, oh, I'd like to work with youth, there used to be a day where we'd say, great, come on downstairs next week, you're on the schedule. But the times have changed, and we want to be careful of those little kids because, unfortunately, we don't know that everybody's intent down there is good. We'd like to assume that. However, that's not always the case. And so we do have a criteria to meet in order to make sure that our kids are safely protected down there. The first one is what we call the 6-month rule, which basically means that somebody serving down there has to have been in faithful attendance here for at least 6 months, just so we have a sense of who that person is working with our kids downstairs. And as all of you have filled out or will fill out, we have a written application, which once again might seem a little bit lengthy, but it really is just to make sure that we know a little bit about your background, to make sure that you're safe and that our kids are safe down there. We will review that, and there might be a chance that there will be a possible interview. And once again, that's just kind of a chat and talk about some of the things that might have been on that paper that maybe concerned us a little bit or we wanted to know more about. It's not supposed to be a mean interrogation. It's just really to find out a little bit more about your background, just to make sure that, like I said, our kids are safe down there, and that if there's something in your past that, we should be made aware of. There's a chance that, I think actually we do contact 2 of the references in there, and once again, just to find out a little bit about you. And then there is a statement at the end that you have read, understood, and will abide to this child protection manual. And I actually have a copy of that for you today. So after we finish going through this, we're just going to ask that you understand everything in the manual, you will adhere to it. You could just sign off on that today. That would be wonderful. Let me go right back down to here. We do run a background check, once again, just for the protection of our children. You'll have to provide us with some type of photo ID just to make sure you are the person who you are saying you are. And on that application, if you have indicated that you have pled guilty to child physical or sexual abuse, we're going to ask that that may not be the place for you downstairs. So you're not going to be able to serve in the children's ministry for obvious reasons for that. If in the case that you have been a victim of child abuse yourself as a child, that's something that the manual states you would have a meeting with the pastor to discuss that and make sure that, just to see, how, if that makes you appropriate to work with our kids, or if that's something that you need a little bit of help with yourself, because that's a very difficult thing. And once again, that's something that we're trying to avoid at all costs happening here at Mount Bethel. Moving right along, the supervision of children and youth. One thing that's very important to us is to create a safe environment downstairs. And so we have something called the 2 unrelated adult rule, which basically means that ideally 2 people will be present in each of the classrooms. However, we do realize that From week to week, we cannot always have 2 people down there, and so in that case, we can have 1 female in each room present as long as the door is open, or if it's an open area, like the classroom downstairs obviously doesn't have a door to close for the older kids. And the whole unrelated portion of that is simply because if there's an accusation made of someone in a room, and that's, for me, in my case, my mother or my sister's down there, that's going to be really hard for me to be very objective about what happened, because that's my mother and my sister, so we want to make sure that we're, the people, we're a good witness to what's happening downstairs. And simply, in a court of law, if that should ever happen, and we hope it doesn't happen, they would say, well, that's your mom or your sister, so they may kind of throw out that testimony where that might actually be really important. So that's the reason why we have that. In terms of the monitor checks, that's the next thing on there. You'll notice that occasionally throughout the lesson, and sometimes a couple times during each lesson, somebody will be walking downstairs, one of our church elders, one of our deacons, and that's something they're just checking to make sure that everything is fine downstairs, and that's something that the insurance policy states. It's just, we call it periodic monitoring checks by walking around, and they're just making sure that everything's okay. There isn't any funny business going on downstairs. Once again, it's just for our protection, so that, if there's ever an accusation made, here are the things that we're doing to ensure your child's safety downstairs. We're trying to keep just the approved workers only in the areas with the children. Now, certainly where the elementary class is, that is an open area down there, so to tell everybody you can't come in the basement at all is unrealistic, but more for the smaller classrooms, we're trying to really just, once again, keep our children safe, and if you're approved, that's really the place for you. However, parents are certainly allowed to go inside to pick up their kids, but, really shouldn't be having a congregation of people meeting in those rooms really for any reason. As I mentioned before, we have an open door / view policy, and you'll notice a lot of those rooms downstairs have the windows cut out now so that you can see what's going on at all times, and once again, that's simply for our protection there. We've actually also installed a gate between the 2 classrooms, between the infant room and the pre-K toddler room, so once again, that's nice and open, just simply so that anybody can look at it at any time and see the activities that are going on in that room. And I think we mentioned this before, but our sign-in and sign-out policy, once again, is children under 8 must be signed in and signed out by parents. And there's another form in there I have, which is actually the registration form. And once again, that just kind of gives us some information on the team about the children that we're working with down there. So the first time, or one of the first times, if I don't catch them the first time, I will try, is to have the parents complete a registration form. And that just gives us some information about the children. And that's something that if you're working down there, you'll certainly know of. Certain things that are important to keep in mind, and but we're, obviously we're trying to keep that information confidential to just the children's ministry team. Once again, we kind of keep going through with creating a safe environment. Records are kept, so you'll see that's why the sign-in sheet is so important. We keep those records for up to 3 years, just so we know who was present on what day, in what room, what time, all those good things. One thing to also keep in mind, there are off-limit locations in the church, and basically those are small rooms. So the children really should remain in those classrooms. And I know growing up in this church, something about that boiler room was really fascinating to me as a child. I don't know what it was, but certainly you shouldn't be going into the boiler room with a child, because even though you might just be grabbing the broom, that's considered an off-limit location because it's a small enclosed space. Okay, so we're trying to just keep the kids where people can see them. And like I said, I don't know what it was about that boiler room, but it was very fascinating to me. And for that same reason, because bathrooms are considered those closed places, that is why we're not permitted to take the children to the bathroom. So that's why if they need to use the bathroom, we'll send somebody up here, we'll contact the parent to come down, grab their child, and take them to the bathroom. And that kind of rolls right into our diapering, toileting policy. Once again, we're not changing diapers. We're not taking the children to the bathroom. Those are things for family members and parents to take care of. Once again, creating a safe environment. In the case that there needed to be youth counseling happening, and I think that happens probably more in the case of the youth group, like the older students that we're not really being trained for right now, but in the case that would have to happen, they say, parent consent and the door would have to be open. Once again, we're keeping those closed spaces, places we're not going to be with the kids. In terms of dismissal from events, and this I think really refers more to the youth group, but it's also important for us to know too, just how it's written in the manual. There's going to be a case where the last child to leave might be in the room with you alone, okay? And so in that instance, they're saying, please use your very best judgment, so please, we try to have, as many kids, so it's not just one kid and one adult in the same place at the same time, but occasionally if everybody's left and that one parent hasn't picked up their child, that's going to happen. Use your best judgment, and hopefully they'll come down quickly. Once again, this next section, trip and retreat supervision, that probably refers to more of the older kids, but something that still we should acknowledge that we realize the policy on. If there's a co-ed overnight, 2 adults should be present. Once again, no adult should be alone in a room with a child or youth. In this case, if there's a retreat or a trip, we need permission slips, also including permission for emergency medical care if that should happen, and that if there's driving involved, we need to make sure that the person who's driving has a clean driving record, they're at least 21 years old, and they're not driving one child alone in the car. There should be at least 2 people in the car with that adult. And something we're doing right here today, the manual states that training sessions on child protection policies and safety issues will be encouraged. That's the reason why we're here today. I know a lot of you have been through this before, but we're just trying to refresh ourselves on some of the policies so that we're aware of them. And something that the manual states, and that's something that as scary as it seems, it's something I have to tell you, is that obviously sexual relations with minors is taken very seriously. So these are, obviously, we know what can happen in those cases, felony convictions, imprisonment. So these are just things that the insurance manual wants to make sure that all volunteers realize this is something we take very serious. And kind of going along with that, if there is a sexual misconduct charge and you're doing something that clearly is not, you shouldn't be doing downstairs, the church insurance policy may not be able to provide a legal defense. However, if you're following the policy and the manual the way it is, like I said, we can clearly come back and say, here are the things we're doing to keep the kids safe. But unfortunately, this is just one of those things that we just have to kind of know about and make sure we're following, adhering to strict standards. Okay, health and safety guidelines is the next section in your manual. Children who are ill should not be brought to the children's program. This can kind of be a gray area because some kids might have colds, some kids might be teething. We're talking about those really sick diseases, things that, really, if they're running a high fever and you just look at them and that child just seems sick, they really shouldn't be here at church. One, because we don't want to get you sick, but also we don't want to get the other kids sick, and we don't want this to be a breeding ground for sickness downstairs. So, if there's a certain case where this seems a little bit tricky and you're not quite sure, flag me down. I don't mind being the person that just says nicely to the parent, you know what, your child does not seem well today. They really want you. Maybe, would you mind coming downstairs? And then I can kind of have that talk with them, just because we don't want, our kids downstairs or you to get sick. Kind of going along with that, proper hand washing should take place. So before, if you could just wash up, and then after with the kids, make sure you're washing up. That would be very important to kind of keep that spread of germs, especially with the infants where you're going to be touching them. And, there's sometimes some of them are spitting up and things like that. We try to want to keep, like I said, the transmission of germs as minor as possible. One thing that we also cannot do downstairs is administer medicine. And this is something that I, as a parent, seem to forget sometimes, is that medicine should not be left in diaper bags. And I know sometimes I leave a little thing of Tylenol in my son's diaper bag, and so I will try to be more mindful of that. But with that in mind, that parents may forget that. We're asking if you, when you receive the children and their diaper bags, if you can just put them up on those hooks that are hanging in the nursery, just to make sure in the case that there is something in there that shouldn't be, that the children don't touch it. I mean, we're certainly not going to go into those diaper bags and kind of check them and say to the parent, look what you have in here, we're not going to be doing that. But if you could just make sure they're up and away so that, the children aren't digging in there and finding things that they shouldn't, would be wonderful. First aid boxes are located in each classroom. They look like this. There's one this one is from the pre-K, toddler, and kindergarten room. It's up on the shelves. There's one in the cabinet in the infant room, and then there's also a box located in those closets to the right for the 1st through 5th grade students downstairs. If there's any accident that occurs while you're down there, that of course results in some type of injury, please report that to me, and we will fill out an accident report just to make sure that we're covered in the instance that happens. Okay, I'm going to pause right now before we kind of go through the next section. Are there any questions in terms of some of these policies that we have? Okay, I will move right along then. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about bloodborne pathogens, and I will say right now that I'm certainly not the expert on this, so I will share with you what I know about this, and if there's any questions that go over my head, and there might be, then I will certainly look them up and get back to you about that, or ask some of you here who are more trained on that than I am. All right, so what is a bloodborne pathogen? Microscopic organisms that are carried in the blood and may cause disease in humans. And once again, this is something we have to go through for the purpose of the training manual, realizing that we're working with the public at large here, and that some of these things could happen, but just kind of knowing what to do in this type of case. Here are some of the bloodborne pathogen diseases that I hope we will never witness downstairs, but we might, and those are things like malaria, syphilis, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV. And they're just some things that are kind of scary, but also important to know. For example, hepatitis B can survive for at least 1 week in dried blood. That's a little bit terrifying to me, but important to know that in the case where a child does cut themselves downstairs, it's really important that we not only take care of the child, but we make sure that everything is cleaned up so that that would never happen downstairs. And like I said, there's just a few little pieces, scary but also useful pieces of information to know. This also, what body fluids can contain bloodborne pathogens, also something good to know, a little bit scary, but these are things that can contain these little germy things. And, skin tissue, blood, saliva, vomit, urine, these things that happen with kids that are kind of gross, but we have to kind of deal with. So just knowing that these are where this transfer can take place is important to know. How is it passed from one person to another? Once again, it's that contact with that person's blood. It's a blood-borne pathogen, so blood being important there, but also a bloody fluid that might contain blood. And these blood-borne pathogens can enter through mucous membranes, such as your eyes, your mouth, your nose. So in that case where something gets splattered in your eye or on your nose or something by your mouth, that's the case where we need to make sure that we rinse you out and clean you up as thoroughly as possible, because that's really where the transfer occurs. How can you be exposed? Well, hopefully downstairs for that hour, we're not going to have a lot of exposure. I wouldn't consider this high-risk exposure, but it's still important to know. And I would think in the case of administering first aid, if a child falls and has a little cut or something like that, that could be where it could happen. And once again, that proper handling of infected waste products. And that's also, I think, a good reason why we don't do diaper changing, because some of those bodily fluids come out in that diaper. So that's something we're going to let parents handle, so we kind of eliminate that risk too, which I think is a good one. Okay, precautions for avoiding infections. We have something called personal protective equipment in each of the classrooms. So in the case where there is an injury where it has some of those has blood or some of those other bodily fluids, we have a bloodborne pathogen kit located near the medical supplies in each one of the rooms, and it simply has gloves, which I think are probably the most important thing, a mask as well, and a bag, as well as some alcohol wipes, which I think they're at least 60% alcohol, which means they are going to kill lots of gross things. And the reason the bag is in here is that after you are done using the gloves, there is a way to correctly take off the gloves so that you don't actually touch, there's blood on this hand and I'm taking off this glove, that if I touch my hand like that, well, of course, then I'm going to have blood on this hand as well. So there's a way of correctly doing it. And my sister's a nurse, and so she probably could do it much better than I could. But basically, you have your gloves on your hand, and you're going to pinch, and you're going to pull down. And once you get to these fingertips, then you're going to pull the other one off. So now the gloves are inside out, and then you're going to actually put them in the bag, seal it up, and safely dispose of it. And that's the way to do it. We don't want anybody reaching into the garbage by accident and touching something that's bloody or that has other bodily fluids on it. We also have another set in the kitchen above the fridge. So in case you need to bring a child into the kitchen, if you feel like, that with the sink being there, it's a better place to kind of administer first aid, there is a set in there as well. Just safety precaution, treat all blood and bodily fluids as if they are contaminated. So even if a child just has a minor cut or something, it's probably a good idea to put those gloves on. And I know sometimes teaching in the classroom, I would stick a Band-Aid on a child and go, oh, I really should have worn gloves, and that's something just try to keep in mind to do. Just like I said, we want to be very safe, as safe down there as we can be. After you're done, wash thoroughly during cleanup. So even if nothing seemed to have come on your hands, still wash them just in case. Like I said, we're trying to be as safe as possible down there. And like I just mentioned, please properly dispose of all contaminated material. Make sure it's bagged and put away. And that's something too. With parents, if a parent should happen to change a diaper downstairs, we're going to keep bags at the bottom of the diaper changing area. There's like a big Tupperware down there, and we're going to stick some bags in there. So that dirty diaper should not just go directly into the garbage. Please have them put it in a bag. I bought these bags. They're called scented bags, so they should smell a little bit better. So just tie them up real good, and we'll have them throw them away. It's just, once again, we don't want anybody sticking their hand into the garbage because they dropped something in there and fishing out a dirty diaper. I skipped one. Okay, just a couple quick things about personal protective equipment. Before you put those gloves on, if you happen to notice there's a tear in there, please don't use it. We want to make sure that we are using the material to keep us safe and it's not defective. We have lots of boxes of gloves downstairs, so not a problem. Anything that's in here has been checked and should not be defective, but in case that it is, we do have, like I said, we especially have lots of other gloves if we need. Make sure after you finish cleaning up the situation, just remove those gloves. If, wherever you're cleaning up that mess, remove those gloves right there. We shouldn't really be walking around church with gloves on if there's something on our gloves. Obviously we don't want to spread that anywhere around the church. We're not going to reuse this equipment. Of course, it's disposable. Get rid of it. And like I said, please bag it before you throw it away. Hand washing is the next section. That is so important. It's one of those things I think as teachers and as parents and working down there, we wash our hands all the time. But once again, just please do that. Like I said, after you're removing this equipment, please wash your hands. Antibacterial soap, because of the bloodborne pathogens thing, we want to make sure that we're getting rid of that stuff off your hands. Hand sanitizer can be used, and I think we do have those dispensers in each of the 2 classrooms downstairs, but really there's nothing better than soap and water. So that can be a temporary thing, but please wash up with soap and water as soon as possible. If you have been involved in a bloodborne pathogen exposure incident, and I put exposure incident in quotations because it's specifically defined as an incident of contact with potentially infectious bodily fluid, and in this case, you have to think that it actually infiltrated mucous membranes or open skin surfaces. So if it hasn't, if you've just been helping clean up and there was blood, that's not considered an exposure incident. It's only considered an exposure incident if it's kind of gone in contact with a cut or in, like I said, one of those mucous membranes. In the case where that happens, or really in any case if there's an injury that happened, please let me know. I just want to make sure that you're covered, the child's okay, not that you're not good at that, but just making sure that everything is done and we've done all the necessary paperwork just to make sure if there's ever an allegation that we're safe and we can say responsibly these are the things we did when this incident occurred. And this kind of goes right into cleaning solutions since we're talking about hand washing. And we have different type of cleaning solutions downstairs. From week to week, we asked if you could help clean up after the children. And so we have something, the Clorox hard surface spray or Clorox wipes are fine just for week to week. However, if there is a bodily fluid present or if you suspect that somebody was sick, like really sick, like more than a cold sick or just oozing all over, we have Clorox disinfecting spray, and that's the green one. Over there, and it's the hospital grade one, and if you read the back, it kills about 30 different things, and that's something that we're going to use. It's a little bit of a strong smell, so if you're using the Clorox disinfecting spray, if you could wait until all the kids are out of the room, and then we'll spray, when there's not that many people downstairs, clean it up, and then leave. We don't want to be worrying about the fumes as well. It is a little bit strong. Okay, before I move on to the next section, any questions about bloodborne pathogens? Good, Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question about the mouth bucket. How do you want us to clean the toys in the mouth bucket?
Oh, good question. Okay, so I'm going to say this aloud so it's recorded properly. The question was, how should we be cleaning the toys in the mouth bucket? That's a very good question. I think what we've been doing is just hot soapy water for that in the sink. I think is how we've been doing that. But I can look into that and see if there's a better solution. And if there is, then I will let you know. But I think that's what we've been doing so far is just cleaning that with hot soapy water. And the toy, once again, with the toys in the mouth bucket, we're trying to choose toys that are not porous and toys that don't have those, kind of has to go with porous, have those little holes in them where they absorb water and then inside they get all funky and mildewy. We're trying to, choose toys that are safe to be washed and they're not going to get kind of funny like that, just because a lot of the toys are going to go in their mouths. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we're going to kind of, I went too far ahead there. Appropriate displays of affection. The type of affection that you show to your kids or your nieces or your nephews, unfortunately, is going to be a little bit different than the type of affection we can show downstairs. Appropriate touch, holding a young child's hand to an activity, things like a light touch to the hand or shoulder to encourage are considered completely appropriate. Inappropriate downstairs would be kissing a child or coaxing the child to kiss you, prolonged physical contact, touching a child in any area covered by a bathing suit. Once again, this is why we are just hands off with the whole diaper changing issue. And then, carrying a child older than nursery age or sitting them on your lap if they're older, certainly it's not really appropriate to sit a 5th grader on your lap. That's just shouldn't be happening downstairs. And then, even a body-to-body hug. And I know that seems hard, especially, with the infants, that's a little bit different. But with the little guys, we do something in school, we call it the side hug, and it seems a little bit awkward, but you just kind of like grab them and put them on your side there, like as a way to show affection, but it's not that body-to-body contact. And I know this seems a little bit funny, but once again, it's just for safety reasons. So we can say, listen, these are our policies. We were doing everything to be safe in the instant that there was ever a report incident, a report that we're just safe. These are our policies. Moving right along, discipline guidelines. These are things that I think we all know as parents and as teachers and working with kids. We're going to reward good behavior. We're going to try to communicate with parents if there's an issue that arises. And if there isn't an issue that arises, it's good to communicate with parents anyway and just tell them, your child's doing a great job down there. They're really listening. They're memorizing the Bible verse. They really did a nice job sharing the toy today, whatever it is. It's just a great way to just, make everybody feel comfortable in that home if that communication is happening. Something important to do, especially with the toddler, pre-K, kindergarten room, as well as the 1st or 5th grade students, is just reminding the kids of the classroom expectations. And I think some of them just need to be reminded sometimes. That's not appropriate. That's not something we're doing. Please stay in your seat. Please remember to raise your hand. Things like that we just can gently remind them to do. If in the case where your gentle reminder is not working, it is okay to remove the child from the group, but still within sight. So certainly, like I said, don't put them in the boiler room. Okay, nothing funny like that. Keep them in your sight, but if you need to, say to them, okay, you're not following directions, I'm going to put you over here, please sit down over here, and when you're ready to rejoin the group, you let me know. And that's something that I used to do more often than I wanted to do when I was teaching, and sometimes it is effective. It kind of gives them a chance to sit there, think about what they've done, and most kids do want to rejoin the group, and so when they're ready, they usually will say, I'm ready now, and can have that conversation. They can come back to the group. If that does not work, please flag me down, and I can certainly return the child to the parent or the guardian if the poor behavior continues. And sometimes just telling the child that's the next step. So if that hasn't worked, just saying to them, you know what, if you can't be responsible enough to be down here, if you can't follow directions, I'm going to have to talk to your parents, and you're going to have to sit upstairs with your parents. And most kids really love being down there, and so that's something that they take very seriously. Certainly we don't have to threaten that right off the bat, but if we have to get to that, we certainly can, just to make sure things are running smoothly downstairs. And I think, too, that other children generally feel safe when they feel like there is a certain boundary and they feel as though these are the rules and that this is what I must follow. If I know I was that nervous kid that when one child was acting out and there were no consequences, it made me feel nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen. So for other kids, too, watching, it's also a lesson to them. Yes, you do need to follow the directions. And yes, you will be safe down here, and we're not going to let this child get out of control. Just a couple other things in the manual, kind of some miscellaneous items. Job switch policy. Things happen from time to time. You might have signed up to work a week downstairs or volunteer a week downstairs, and then you realize you can't, and I realize that happens. So please make sure the person that you switch with is a trained volunteer, so anybody here, and there are a few other people. Basically, if they're on the schedule, they're safe, and they've been trained, and they can certainly be someone you can switch with. But also just let me know if you make this switch, just once again for record keeping, that I know, who's down there at all times. Like I said, for our records. If you are feeling sick on Sunday morning, that would probably be a time to excuse yourself. And I'll make sure all of you have my cell phone number, or you can email me. If you're really feeling sick one morning, we certainly don't want you to be serving down there if you're feeling sick and also transmitting that illness to anybody else. So, that would be something that you would be excused that week. Name tags. Mine's not super visible right now, but I do have it on. This is something that we're asking everybody to wear, and it really just makes us look a little more professional downstairs. And I think it's also comforting to know to parents, because you may not know all the parents, when they're handing their child off to you, at least you're wearing a name tag, so they may not know you, but at least they know your first and last name. And that, I think, just makes parents feel a little bit more comfortable down there, and makes us look a little more professional. So I hate to be the name tag police, but I might come and hand you your name tag with a smile and say, "Oop, you forgot your name tag." And like I said, I'm not trying to be harsh about that, but I think it really just makes parents feel a little more comfortable knowing who they're handing their child off to. Response to injuries and accidents. If something should happen downstairs, obviously proper medical attention will be given. So really any incident that happens down there, if you have to pull out one of these kits, please let me know, and I can certainly help assist in that way. I hope this never would happen, but if it does need to happen and we need to call an ambulance, we certainly can, but we're hoping that will not happen. Once again, please wear that personal protective equipment. Clean up materials. Once again, put them in a bag. Make sure it's tied. In the case where there is an incident that occurs, we will contact the child's parent immediately and have them come downstairs, and then that child's care will be kind of turned over then to the parent, just because if something happens, such as a head injury, that parent knows that child best and will know what to look for if that child's not acting completely themselves. If something happens, we'll make sure we fill out a accident injury report, and I can help you with that, but we really should fill that out within 24 hours just because that's when we're most freshest with what happened with the incident. Okay, and I'm actually going to pause right here and ask if there are any other questions about some of these miscellaneous items in our training manual. Okay, I'm actually going to turn this over now to Leslie. The next section is about the child abuse, and once again, this is something that we have to cover as part of our insurance company requires us to cover, but I think it's something important. It's important for us to just know in general, and Leslie is kind of our expert in this area, so I will pass the microphone off to her.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to flick for you? Or?
Yes, why don't you flick?
Okay, I can flick for you.
I am here because I am familiar. I'm a social worker. I've been working with kids for over 20 years. And when I think about child protection, to me this is the thing that always comes to mind first about child abuse. And it can be an uncomfortable subject to discuss. There are people who have never been personally abused, or don't know anyone who's ever been abused, or have never actually met an abuser. So it can be a little bit hard to conceive that in church there could be people, male or female, that behave like loving Christian people, but might actually have this secret side to them that we don't know. And that's the important thing that that's why we want to talk about this. Another interesting fact that has been researched is that 10 to 20% of all abuse in churches is actually perpetrated by children or youth. So we always think of the adult, but there are actually teenagers or children who, for whatever reason, might be involved also in that sort of thing. So that's another reason why we don't want to go into separate rooms or boiler rooms or things like that. So we're going to go, and this is the first one. It's basically all the information together. Everyone in New Jersey is a mandated reporter, which means in the past, mandated reporters used to be like a principal, or in a church, maybe the pastor or someone else. But in New Jersey, everyone is a mandated reporter, which means if you see something and you have concern about what you've seen, or you have a reasonable reason to think that something has happened, then you would call the central registry number, which is the 877 number. And if you think that the child's in immediate danger, you would call 911. So that's it. You can flick that one. Thank you. When you call, if I happen to be here, if you have a concern, fortunately we haven't had a concern in my memory, but I'm still talking about it, and if we do, I would be glad to help you make the call. But when you call, this is what they normally ask. They're going to ask who you are, and they want to know the name of the child that you believe has possibly been abused, the name of the parent, the address, and the phone number of that family, because clearly they're going to need to investigate it and they want to have that information. They're going to ask you what you saw and if there was any other previous things you were concerned about. And then it goes on. If you don't know any other information, you only know what you saw because it was just a brief time. A visitor came into the nursery and you saw some bruises or whatever on the child that looked significant. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. That's really what they want to know. You don't have to, have any more information than, you just tell them, I don't know anything else. This is all I know. Okay. The next one is, do callers have immunity from civil or criminal liability? Any person who calls in good faith is considered immune from prosecution. They do say that you can call and report things anonymously, which is certainly possible. For me, if I've called from a school, they almost always figure out who it is anyway, because the kid will say who they were just speaking to before the call was made. But that happens anyway. And if you do see something and later on it is clear that other people have seen it and you haven't called, technically that would be, they could charge you as a disorderly person because you didn't report it. There used to be a fine associated with it too, but apparently that's not the case anymore. All this information was taken from the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. It's no longer called DIFAS. So this information is straight from their website. I basically just cut and paste it, so I wouldn't make any errors here. Okay, the next one is after you make a call, the division has 24 hours to make the investigation, and that usually means they go to the home and they interview the child separately from the parent. They don't interview them together because they don't want the parent necessarily to prompt the child. And normally, for me, if I make a call, I do not tell the child I'm making the call or the parent, because you don't want them to be able to, the mother to scold the child and say don't say anything when they come or anything like that. So normally I don't say anything. So that would kind of be the same case here. If you saw something in the nursery that you were concerned about, you would make the call, but we wouldn't inform the family that we're doing it, which might seem harsh, but that's the way it is. Okay, so the next one, to define child abuse and neglect. You can see abuse is the physical, sexual, or emotional harm or risk to a child under the age of 18 caused by a parent or their caregiver. And neglect is when a parent or caregiver fails to provide proper supervision for a child or adequate food, clothing, shelter, or education, even though they're financially able to do so. Okay, the physical indicators. A lot of these things, some of these things can happen just naturally when you're a child. You're falling, you're climbing, you get hurt. And a lot of these things we wouldn't even see anyway because a lot of them might be under clothing. But in summer, when they have maybe no sleeves or shorts on, you might be more likely to see some of these things. So basically it's unexplained bruises and welts on the face, lips, mouth, torso, back, thighs, bottom. Could be in various stages of healing, reflecting the shape of the article used to inflict. Recently there was that football player with the switch, and he obviously hit his 4-year-old child a little bit too much, and if you saw pictures of that on the news, you could actually see the exact shape of the width of the switch as he was hitting his 4-year-old child. People do hit their kids with electrical cords, belt buckles. The next one is unexplained lacerations or abrasions. That's kind of self-explanatory. It's like it just looks beyond what a child might get if they just fell or had hurt themselves another way. And also, we probably wouldn't see this, but also in their genital area, lacerations or abrasions. That would be very, very unusual for that to happen, in just without that being done purposefully. Unexplained burns. It does actually look just like the object. You can see someone's arm, you'll see cigarette burns. It's a little round circle and looks just like burns. And it can be on the soles, palms, back, or buttocks. Immersion burns, we probably wouldn't see this. This is when a parent puts a child in I know these are all horrible to hear about, but there are parents who put really hot water in bathtubs and put their kid in the hot water, and that would be an immersion burn, and then you'd see that on their bottom or on their hands. And even with an iron or something else, or rope burns on their arms, legs, and torso. Unexplained fractures. Often what happens is if a child is injured and they're taken to the emergency room, the doctor might see on the x-rays healed multiple spiral fractures or green stick fractures, or that maybe you don't actually see because they're not sticking out, but they're healed, and which means there had been prior abuse where the arm, and if you see that and there's a lot of them or a number of them, you know that's more than just they fell down the stairs by themselves. The next piece is neglect. This might be a little bit harder to see or easier to see. You don't see that a lot now, but it still is out there where a child might come in and they look grossly underweight. They may have this also could be for other reasons besides. They could be ill. They could have a lot of allergies, and that's why they have big circles under their eyes, or look very thin, and maybe they have allergy problems and they can't eat a lot certain foods. You just don't know. But anyway, neglect, the physical thing, is a consistent lack of supervision, especially in dangerous activities or long periods. Children that are unsupervised that you might, not around here so much, but in some towns, like in the school where I work, it's a small town, I hear that some of the kids are out there 11 o'clock at night, or they're riding their bikes around, and you just know that's not a safe thing for a kid to be doing 11 o'clock at night when they're only 5 years old. They shouldn't be roaming the streets at that age. Behavioral indicators would be begging, stealing food, extended stays at school. I know a lot of parents actually have to do this, a lot of single parents who work, and they're supposed to be at work early. They drop their kids off at daycare very early. Then daycare brings them over to the school, and then after school they're taken back to daycare, and they're not picked up till maybe 6 or 6:30 at night. That's a really long day for a little kid, but unfortunately there are some parents who they have to work. They have no choice, and that's what happens. But it is kind of hard for the kids when they do that. So constantly falling asleep in class, that probably isn't something that we would see here for just an hour. In school that happens, where kids will come in and they just sleep on the desk, and you don't know why they're so tired. It could be they didn't get to sleep till 1 o'clock in the morning because there were people screaming in the house, or I don't know, they had a visit with their other biological parent and that didn't go well. You just don't know. So sexual abuse is the next piece. The physical indications, this would probably be if something had actively just happened recently. The child might have difficulty walking or sitting, have torn, stained, or bloody underclothing, be very uncomfortable when they're sitting down. You might see them shifting around a lot. It just seems like something is wrong down there, but you don't really know what it is. Bruises or bleeding, and venereal disease. Obviously, we would not know this again. I'm giving you the whole deal here, even though you probably never see this. Behavioral indicators would be a child that's really withdrawn. That also could be because they're depressed. Might be that. It might have nothing to do with abuse. Children that might act overly like an infant when they're not an infant, they're older, or having a lot of information about sexual things. When you see a kindergartner who's really aware of things that they shouldn't know until they're maybe a teenager, that's a concern. Why do they have all that information? And then, of course, if they report to you that they were sexually assaulted, there you would know right there. Emotional maltreatment. This, again, can happen in just an absolutely normal home, but physical indicators, and I have seen this in young children who have been abused, habit disorders, biting. They seem to bite, and it's difficult to get rocking. Some kids automatically do this in a crib, but if they're in a crib or they're just constantly rocking and banging their head against the front of the crib and the crib actually moves across the floor, it's like an incessant rocking. Conduct disorders, that would be kids that are very destructive or antisocial, have a very difficult time being around other children. Sleep disorders, speech disorders, and again, this can be just an absolutely normal family, but these things do kind of go along with emotional maltreatment. And then behavioral indicators would be they sit there just staring ahead, really afraid to make a move because they don't know if something's going to happen to them. They might actually have been figured out a long time ago. If you move too quickly or if you grab something you want, you might get slapped across the face. So you're not going to do that, and you might be reluctant to do that. And just the opposite then, aggressive or demanding, and or overly adoptive behavior, and this when they actually adopt the behaviors of an adult or a child, as I had said before, which would be extremely inappropriate for them to do for their age. So we just get back to the last piece of this is just to remember the very first slide regarding this, that there is a central registry number to call. And if you felt that there was imminent danger, you're probably not going to see any of this, let me say. But if you do, just know that there is this resource out there to report. And otherwise, that's it. Does anyone have any questions on this for me? Okay.
All right.
They're all stunned into silence.
I think that was the last of it, but I just wanted to take some time really quick just to thank you all for being here and going through this training. I know some of the stuff that we talked about is a little bit scary, not fun when we think about working with kids, but it's just important that we're trained and that we know what to do in these types of circumstances. And certainly the piece that Leslie just talked about, if any of those things that you suspect, she is highly trained in this, certainly let me know, and we'll talk to Leslie about this as well. Hopefully in the hour that we have the kids downstairs, there won't be something that, that makes it that confident in our minds that is happening. But certainly if we feel that's something that's happening at their home, that's scary and that's horrible for that child to have to go through. So we, do want to make sure that we know what types of things to look for, for the safety of the child. Any other questions about anything we covered? It's your final chance. All right. Thank you so much for all being here today. Dave's going to close us out. And then right after that, the last thing I'm going to have you do is just sign that acknowledgement form that you've been at this training. You've gone through the manual. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you. Can we thank Jackie and Leslie for their hard work? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we pray that you would show your love through us, and I thank you for each servant here today. Without them, it's really not possible for us to do the good ministry you've called us to at Mount Bethel, and because of them, great things happen here. And so we pray your blessing upon them, and may you use us to show your love to the children at this church. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.